Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on homeopathy with our beloved Dr. Pachegaonkar. Sir, today we have an important topic because the coronavirus seems to be spreading rather rapidly.
Yes.
As a homeopathic doctor, do you have cures for it?
So we have to approach, in general, how we approach new set of virus infection. It's a recently mutated altogether a new variety of virus. Though similar episodes have been there, similar epidemics have been there.
Like SARS?
SARS, then even swine flu. New strains have come up. Our basic approach is that these viruses, they are opportunistic. Unless there is favorable background, virus cannot multiply. Otherwise, it becomes an inert substance. So where the immunity is already compromised in individuals, there the virus multiplies very fast and starts showing symptoms. Only problem with coronavirus is it is highly contagious.
So even people who don't have problems with immunity could catch it?
Yes, they could catch it, but only plus point is their body is able to resist the multiplication of this virus, and they just pass through either subclinical phase or little clinical symptoms will come and they will develop immunity. Whereas unhealthy people are already they are down, either so much aged people or already people having some respiratory disorders, they can't cope with this course of viral fever. Like you see measles, chicken pox, similar conditions are there, where measles and chicken pox, if the person is healthy, the disease can run its course without any fatality. Little bit of fever, little bit of body ache, discomfort, some eruptions, and 4 or 5 days or 1 week illness, and then person comes out.
But these are not viruses, are they?
Yes, similar.
Similar?
Yeah.
I see.
It is not same virus, definitely, but similar.
But there's a similarity.
See, virus is something where it behaves as if non-living when the conditions are not conducive. And only when the conditions are favorable, it starts multiplying. So we have seen the virus of chicken pox remaining dormant in the person for decades, and then it comes up in the form of herpes zoster. So behavior is similar. Only problem with this coronavirus is it's a new mutation, and as it is new, there was no one who had antibodies against it, or no individual had a knowledge or the phenomena of developing antibodies against it or controlling it.
So there was no resistance to it?
No resistance to it, direct resistance to it.
Yes.
But what happens, in general, if handful of healthy individuals come down with the infection of this virus, they develop antibodies. They can nullify, they develop sort of a system where the multiplication of this virus is not allowed. It's forced to be dormant. They may act as carrier for spreading infection, but they themselves will never allow this disease to occur in them. So it passes through subclinical phase. And in this universe, there is a wonderful phenomena called herd intelligence. That herd intelligence is something...
Herd intelligence?
Yes. This is the term because if small group of people develop antibodies, somehow other individuals in the same universe get that system very easily. So initially, if there are, say, even few hundred people who could develop resistance, then the whole population will be saved. Like that, because with
Yes.
the phenomena of higher intelligence or universal intelligence or herd intelligence.
Yes. This is something we understand from the yoga of Sri Aurobindo
Yes.
also.
Yes.
That there is a kind of, Mother says, like, it spreads. The good things spread also.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we call universal intelligence.
Okay.
With that, even the phenomena of production of antibodies, that capability also will be communicated to the other people and they will develop. So the gravity of this epidemic, the fatality will be more in initial cases. And now it's little more than a month now. We have studied, somehow initially there was a lot of confusion about symptomatology, but the symptoms are very similar to other viral infections. Like initially the person develops sort of a sore throat, then nose block, then little bit of body ache and toxicity, then on second or third day the person develops fever. And if the immunity is compromised, if the immunity is not sufficient enough to resist the multiplication, then it affects the respiratory system and the nerves. And once the respiratory system is grossly affected, then the person can't cope with it. Therefore, sometimes we need to give ventilator and artificial respiration. And once it is like made dormant, not allowed to multiply by the body, then the person recovers. So it itself will not cause fatality unless we allow it to take place. So here what we advise in general is, like, drink ample of water, lot of hydration, so that the respiratory system, the passage, also releases ample of mucus for effective drainage and disposal. Then vitamin C in the form of, say, lemon juice in the morning. So ample of fluid, lemon juice in the morning, and timely sleep. Timely sleeping, like that is what we advise, that have early dinner and sleep
And
earlier.
before midnight to get the best
Yes,
hours.
yes. So ideally like 8 o'clock if one sleeps, with dinner at say 6 o'clock. So 8 to 5, 8 to 4 would be the best period for sleep. So if you are sleeping early and then having vitamin C supply and ample of water. So for such epidemics we should have like both the approaches. One is to enhance our immunity, which can contain the multiplication, and second is we should restrict the spread. So
Yes.
best thing
That's
is
quarantine.
No,
Yes.
quarantine is where the people are carrier or they are having infection or they are carriers. But what I would suggest is the person should quarantine oneself so that it doesn't spread to the community. But even in community also what happens, like this virus can survive on some walls or some wherever the virus has lodged. It may survive in this environment for 12 to 24 hours. So best and the best, like, common vulnerable point is our hands, because we handle things and then we wipe our mouth, rub our eyes. So therefore, whenever you are working with some things, like you open the door knob or in public places especially, there you must see that you wash your hands and then only come in contact with your eyes and mouth and nose, because that's the commonest entry point. So if the virus gets lodged somewhere where you don't handle it, then it won't survive beyond 12 hours. So best is like you wash your hands before you handle food or you rub your eyes and all. Then now it's like a common phenomena like our Indian system. If you wish people with this namaskar, that's the best thing because you don't touch anyone. So if you don't know whether the person is carrying virus in his hand or not, so best is avoid close body contacts. So avoid shake hands. Then if someone is seemingly affected, the droplets with sneezing and all can fly even up to 1 meter and people can contact. So best is the person who is affected should wear a mask or some cover, especially while sneezing or blowing nose. So these precautions if you take, the spread will be little less than what it is rampant. But homeopathically, even Hahnemann has said in Organon of Medicine that all these diseases, even epidemics, they are all some negative forces in the universe which come into play. Even Mother has said when she visited Japan and that influenza was very much rampant there, that epidemic, and Mother has faced it, and Mother has described that it was like a headless monster, a dynamic negative influence which was affecting people.
A force, yes.
So best is like we have to be unto oneself, don't go in crowd, especially if the hall is air conditioned, the droplets or the virus will be just floating with the air, and same air is being circulated, especially airports where centrally they are air conditioned in the flights. So you avoid going in the crowd.
And do you see that this epidemic will spread much more for a while?
It will spread, but the gravity will fade. Maybe many people see like influenza, swine flu, millions of people got it, but later on there was no mortality. Initially there was, but later on there was no mortality.
I see.
And mainly it is again a panic or war medication or even other underlying conditions which give rise to complications. Otherwise, the infection itself will not be that grave, even if it spreads. Because, see, like measles, it spread, still the measles, though rare cases, but still it exists, in spite of so much vaccinations and all. So, coronavirus will spread, but the gravity will not be there.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mother, sometimes we are terribly afraid. What should we do in such a case? Mother answers, that depends on the nature of the fear. Is it a fear without a cause, or is it based on a cause? Because the remedy differs. It is based on a cause. No, there is a small remedy which is very, very easy. For it is based on a simple personal question of one's common sense. You must observe yourself a little and say that when you are afraid, it is as though the fear was attracting the thing you are afraid of. If you are afraid of illness, it is as though you were attracting the illness. If you are afraid of an accident, it is as though you were attracting the accident. And if you look into yourself and around yourself a little, you will find it out. It is a persistent fact. So, if you have just a little common sense, you say, it is stupid to be afraid of anything, for it is precisely as though I were making a sign to that thing to come to me. If I had an enemy who wanted to kill me, I would not go and tell him, You know it's me you want to kill. It is something like that. So since fear is bad, you won't have it. And if you say you are unable to prevent it by your reason, well, that shows you have no control over yourselves and must make a little effort to control yourselves. That is all. Oh, there are many ways of curing oneself of fear. But in reality, everyone finds his own way, the one good for him. There are people to whom you have to simply say, "Your fear is a weakness," and they would immediately find the means to look at it with contempt, for they have a horror of weakness. There are others, you tell them, fear is a suggestion from hostile forces. You must push it away as you drive off hostile forces. And this is very effective. For each one it is different. But first of all, you must know that fear is a very bad thing, very bad. It is a dissolvent. It is like an acid. If you put a drop of it on something, it eats into the substance. The first step is not to admit the possibility of fear. Yes, that's the first step. I know people who used to boast about their fear. These are incurable. That is, quite naturally they would say, just imagine, I was so frightened. And then what? It is nothing to be proud of. With such people you can do nothing. However, when once you recognize that fear is neither good nor favorable, nor noble, nor worthy of a consciousness a little enlightened, you begin to fight against it. And I say, one man's way is not another's. One must find one's own way. It depends on each one. Fear is also a terribly contagious collective thing. Contagious. It is much more catching than the most contagious of illnesses. You breathe an atmosphere of fear, and instantly you feel frightened, without even knowing why or how. Nothing, simply because there was an atmosphere of fear. A panic at an accident is nothing but an atmosphere of fear spreading around over everybody. And it is quite curable. There have been numerous cases of a panic being stopped outright because some people refused the suggestion and could counteract it with an opposite suggestion. For mystics, the best cure, as soon as one begins to feel afraid of something, is to think of the divine and then snuggle in his arms or at his feet and leave him entirely responsible for everything that happens within, outside, everywhere. And immediately the fear disappears. This is the cure for the mystic. It is the easiest of all. But everybody does not enjoy the grace of being a mystic. Mother passes on to another question, illnesses. During the talk in 1929, someone asked whether illnesses were not due to microbes rather than to adverse forces or to fluctuations of yoga. Mother answered, "Where does yoga begin and where does it end? Is not the whole of your life yoga? The possibilities of illness are always there in your body and around you. You carry within you, or there swarm about you, the microbes and germs of every disease. How is it that all of a sudden you succumb to an illness which you did not have for years? You will say it is due to a depression of the vital force. But from where does the depression come? It comes from some disharmony in the being, from a lack of receptivity to the divine forces. When you cut yourself off from the energy and light that sustain you, then there is this depression. There is created what medical science calls a favorable ground, and something takes advantage of it. It is doubt, gloominess, lack of confidence, a selfish turning back upon oneself, upon yourself, that cuts you off from the light and divine energy that gives the attack this advantage. It is this that is the cause of your falling ill, and not microbes. One thing that is now beginning to be recognized by everyone, even by the medical corps, is that hygienic measures, for example, are effective only to the extent that one has confidence in them. Take the case of an epidemic. Many years ago we had a cholera epidemic here. It was bad. But the chief medical officer of the hospital was an energetic man. He decided to vaccinate everybody. When he discharged the vaccinated men, he would tell them, "Now you are vaccinated and nothing will happen to you. But if you were not vaccinated, you would be sure to die." He told them this with great authority. Generally, such an epidemic lasts a long time, and it is difficult to check it. But in some 15 days, I think, this doctor succeeded in checking it. In any case, it was done miraculously fast. But he knew very well that the best effect of his vaccination was the confidence it gave to people. Now, quite recently, they have found something else, and I consider it wonderful. They have discovered that for every disease, there is a microbe that cures it. Call it a microbe if you like. Anyway, some sort of germ. But what is so extraordinary is that this microbe is extremely contagious, even more contagious than the microbe of the disease, and it generally develops under two conditions: in those who have a sort of natural good humor and energy, and in those who have a strong will to get well. Suddenly they catch the microbe and are cured. And what is wonderful is that if there is one who is cured in an epidemic, 3 more recover immediately, and this microbe is found in all who are cured. But I'm going to tell you something. What people take to be a microbe is simply the materialization of a vibration or a will from another world. When I learned of these medical discoveries, I said to myself, truly science is making progress. One might almost say, with greater reason, matter is progressing. It is becoming more and more receptive to a higher will, and what is translated in their science as microbes will be perceived, if one goes to the root of things, as simply a vibratory mode, and this vibratory mode is the material translation of a higher will. If you can bring this force, or this will, this power, this vibration, call it what you will, into certain given circumstances, not only will it act in you, but also through contagion around you. Why does one feel afraid? I have been told, and this was one of the teachings of a very old tradition, that it was the influence of the adverse forces upon earth that had created fear, for it was their way of acting on human beings. But animals also feel fear, so that takes away a little from the strength of the argument. For I don't think the adverse beings have any special interest in creating fear in animals. Fear is a phenomenon of unconsciousness. It is a kind of anguish that comes from ignorance. One does not know the nature of a certain thing, does not know its effect, or what will happen, does not know the consequences of one's acts. One does not know so many things, and this ignorance brings fear. One fears what one does not know. It may also be a mixture of apprehension, a kind of instinct. When one instinctively feels that something is dangerous and hasn't the means to remedy it, when one does not know what to do to protect oneself from it, then he is afraid. There are, I believe, countless reasons for fear, but it is a movement of unconsciousness in every case. That which knows has no fear. That which is perfectly awake, which is fully conscious, and which has no fear. It is always something dark that is afraid. One of the great remedies for conquering fear is to face boldly what one fears. You are put face to face with the danger you fear, and you fear it no longer. The fear disappears. From the yogic point of view, the point of view of discipline, this is the cure recommended. In the ancient initiations, especially in Egypt, in order to practice occultism, as I was telling you last time, it was necessary to abolish the fear of death completely. Well, one of the practices of those days was to lay the neophyte in a sarcophagus and leave him in there for a few days, as though he were dead. Naturally, he was not left to die, neither of hunger nor suffocation, but still he remained lying there as though he were dead. It seems that cures you of all fear. When fear comes, if one succeeds in putting upon it consciousness, knowledge, force, light, one can cure it altogether. There is indeed the Christian religion which says that fear comes of our having eaten the apple in the Garden of Eden. That, with knowledge came fear, and upon earth it is always this fear which governs all life for all human beings. Only, here again, I repeat my argument that animals also have fear. Animals have not sinned, haven't eaten the apple, so they shouldn't have any fear. It is a half-consciousness mixed with a sort of ignorant instinct which stresses a danger and at the same time does not know its remedy. But certainly the fact is that the adverse beings of the vital world, who fight against the divine work, make an extensive use of fear. It is through that they have the strongest hold on human beings. Besides, they are not the only ones. There are also all the political and religious means which are of that type. There are religions which found their power over the believers simply through the fear of death and of what will happen thereafter, and of all catastrophes which await you after death if you do not obey blindly to the laws they dictate to you. This fear may also come from an antipathy, that is, a lack of affinity with something. Some people are especially afraid of fire. Some especially fear water. Others have a special fear of one animal or another. It comes from a disharmony between the vital vibrations, and then it is translated in this body unconsciousness by fear. The body is a terribly unconscious thing. How one has to work to give it just a little consciousness. It lives automatically by habit. It is terribly unconscious. So, the hour of death seems therefore to be inexorably fixed, except for very few individuals who possess powers that the human race in general does not command. This is exactly what I have just explained. It is a very few who are capable of bringing down another determinism into the physical determinism. These can change the hour of death. This is exactly what I've just been explaining at full length. The power lies in bringing down a higher consciousness into the material consciousness, and with the higher consciousness bringing down a higher determinism which changes the material determinism. Question: sometimes there are latent powers in us which we are unaware. To do a work, how is one to know whether one is capable of doing it or not? Mother responds, how can one know whether one is capable of doing it or not? By trying. That's the best thing. And if you do not succeed immediately, persevere. And you must know that if a very strong urge to do something comes to you, that means this work has something to do with you, and you are capable of doing it. but one can have powers which are so well hidden that one has to dig long before finding them. So you must not get discouraged at the first setback. You must persist. Nor worthy of a consciousness a little enlightened, you begin to fight against it. And I say, one man's way is not another's. One must find one's own way. It depends on each one. Fear is also a terribly contagious collective thing. Contagious. It is much more catching than the most contagious of illnesses. You breathe an atmosphere of fear, and instantly you feel frightened, without even knowing why or how. Nothing, simply because there was an atmosphere of fear. A panic at an accident is nothing but an atmosphere of fear spreading around over everybody. And it is quite curable. There have been numerous cases of a panic being stopped outright because some people refused the suggestion and could counteract it with an opposite suggestion. For mystics, the best cure, as soon as one begins to feel afraid of something, is to think of the divine and then snuggle in his arms or at his feet and leave him entirely responsible for everything that happens within, outside, everywhere. And immediately the fear disappears. This is the cure for the mystic,